News, not because, not just by the doings of few wrong people, but because of the silence of the majority. And Ms. Hansen, I want to thank you. Despite being in position of power, you have come out to support us. So thank you so much. Next, I'd like to welcome Sangay Phuntsog, one of our young members of Tibetan Association of Santa Fe, to read Sikyong Lobsang Sangay's statement.
Hello. When the People's Liberation Army of China first marched into Tibet, they promised to build one road, one which would bring peace and prosperity for the Tibetan people. However, once the road was completed, the People's Liberation Army's tanks, guns, and more soldiers came and occupied the entire plateau of Tibet. 60 years ago, on this very day in 1959, the Tibetan people rose up against the occupying Chinese army. With their fists raised in the air, our brothers and sisters marched together to make it clear that the land of snow is a Tibetan territory. Tibet belongs to Tibetans, they shouted. Standing steadfast in unity, they protected and ensured the safety of our Tsawe Lama, our root guru, His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama. Over the last 60 decades, the government in Beijing has brutally repressed the Tibetan people, denied us our basic rights, and has consistently pursued systematic policies to wipe out the Tibetan language, culture, unique identity, and spiritual practices. In essence, China has deliberately aimed to eradicate Tibetan civilizations from the face of this earth. In this year's annual report, Human Rights Watch states that the Chinese authorities have used a nationwide anti-crime campaign to encourage the people to denounce the members of their communities on the slightest suspicion of reverence and support for His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama. Furthermore, the crackdown on human rights defenders has testified in recent years. Language advocate Tashi Wangju is currently serving an arbitrary 5-year jail sentence. His only crime is advocating for the Tibetan people's cultural and linguistic rights as enshrined in the PRC's own constitution. Recently, China has also banned Tibetan children from attending informal language classes held in regional monasteries. As a prelude to this ambition to control the global surveillance network, China has used Tibet as testing ground for high-tech surveillance methods. Using a grid system of social management, the Communist Party strengthens its own Orwellian control over both the electronic and physical surveillance of Tibet. Additionally, in 2008, roadblocks and checkpoints have increased dotted all across the major roads of urban areas as well as remote areas in the Tibetan Plateau. Chinese authorities have assigned at least one officer for every 20 Tibetans in the so-called autonomous region. In a dystopian world, it is created often a son is pitted against his father, a daughter against her mother, and a sibling against a sibling. Commonly known as the Third Pole, the Tibet Plateau holds the world's largest reservoir of glaciers apart from the two poles. Tibet, therefore, is the source of some of the largest rivers in Asia, with over 1 billion people depending on these waters. Consequently, rising temperatures on the high plateau endangers the livelihood of hundreds of millions of people in Asia, and also negatively amplifies the world's global climate change. China's deeply flawed environmental political policies have already turned the Tibetan Plateau into destructive mining hubs, and unbridled damming of rivers makes the situation even more dangerous. The assaults on Tibet and her people have always been multi-pronged. Over 2 million Tibetan farmers, particularly nomads, have been forcibly removed from their ancestral land and relocated in large-scale alternative opportunities to lead a dignified and traditional life. As a resentment to these harsh and repressive policies, 153 Tibetans have self-immolated since 2009, with the most recent one committed by a 23-year-old man named Dopo on November 18. While committing self-immolation, many of the protesters have called to restore freedom for Tibetans and the return of His Holiness the Dalai Lama to Tibet. Freedom House has listed Tibet as the world's second least free region for 4 consecutive years. Likewise, Reporters Without Borders expressed outrage over the systematic violation of press freedom in Tibet and stated that it is harder for journalists to access Tibet than it is to access North Korea. My Tibetan brothers and sisters around the world, in spite living through the darkest period of our history, have stood together in unity and achieved a great many things against all odds. Our journey over the past 6 decades has also been that of hope, resilience, and resistance. Beginning in the early 1950s in eastern Tibet, each of China's tyrannical policy has been met with the absolute defiance. The Tibetan National Uprising of March 1959, brave resistance in prisons and concentration camps in the 1960s and 1970s, and the large-scale demonstrations in the 1980s have all shown that Tibetan people have consistently and collectively fought for their rights, freedom, and justice. In 2008, the whole world witnessed a new generation of Tibetans in a nationwide uprising against the Chinese occupation and with an ignited spark of unwavering courage to assert for their freedom and dignity. They declared, "Our voices will not be suppressed. Our commitment will not falter." This resolute resistance continues. We are aware that the Chinese government pays only lip service to words like cooperation and dialogue. If indeed in earnest believes the cooperation can bring the world peace, it should renew its dialogue with the envoys of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. As we stated repeatedly, the envoys are ready to talk and resolve the issue of Tibet through the middle way approach. Instead of looking to end the 60 years of repression in Tibet, the Chinese government has come out with a 0 and 100 strategy. Under this new strategy, zero news from international media in exile Tibetans will be allowed into Tibet, and projects 100% official propaganda about Tibet to the outside world and the Tibetan community in exile. The Chinese government assumes that the issue of Tibet will fade over time, but our experience for over half a century makes us believe otherwise. The young Tibetans in Tibet experience repression and resistance, whereas young Tibetans in exile live with freedom and democracy. Together, the young generation in Tibet and in exile are committed to seeking truth and justice. This new generation of Tibetans are committed to preserving our unique identity and pursuing our dignity. They are also prepared to carry forward the baton of struggle until the Tibet issue is resolved. Ultimately, it is for the Tibetan people to decide their own destiny and that of Tibet. To honor and offer our deep gratitude for the support we have received for the last 60 years, the Kashang has dedicated 2018 as a year of gratitude. Accordingly, we begin with Thank You India and end with Thank You America, with programs in many other countries in between to express our profound appreciation to old and new friends of Tibet. I once again want to convey our sincere thank you to our dear friends in India and around the world. My friends, the tragic case of Tibet is a stark reminder of how much work is left to be done. 60 years of the occupation of Tibet and the repression of Tibetans is far too long. To ensure that Tibet's freedom struggle marches forward, the Kashang today officially declares 2019 as the Year of Commitment. I want to call upon the freedom-loving people of the world to commit to end the repression in Tibet and to commit to fight against impunity. To Tibetan people everywhere, let us continue our commitment to struggle for justice. Let us continue to strengthen our resilience so that we can unite with our brothers and sisters in Tibet in freedom. Let us commit to the return of His Holiness, the great 14th Dalai Lama, to the Potala Palace in Lhasa, where he rightfully belongs. Long live His Holiness, and long live Tibet. Thank you.